Welcome everyone. So this is part two. On advanced GIS methods training, so AHAH and multi-dimensional indices. And in this part, we're going to focus on the methodology or the kind of set of methodologies of multi-dimensional indices and how we use that to create the AHAH index. If you haven't seen part one already, go and watch part one first, because that explains what AHAH is and how it's created. So it's important that you've seen that already. With me today, I've got Dr. Mark Green and Dr. Kostas Daras, who are both involved in creating the AHAH index. And so I'm going to take us through a few slides where we explain how we created, and Mark and Kostas are going to give us some more details about how they did what they did and why, and some of the kind of pros and cons of the decisions they chose to create the index in that sense. So, we've kind of got the top question of how was AHAH created. So we've already said a little bit about the different domains and the different indicators within those domains and some of the data sources that we've used. Just to dig into a little bit more of the data set specifically. So there was a selection of the retail data was what we might call consumer data. So a lot of this was from the Consumer Data Research Centre in terms of business locations, business types, and that set. But the majority of the data was open data from a variety of different sources. A lot of the health-related data was from NHS Digital, NHS Scotland, for example, hospital locations, GP locations. OpenStreetMap we use quite heavily in the routing element, the Routino section, which we'll get to in a bit. And we use data from Open Ordnance Survey, Open Data Green Spaces, and the European Settlement Maps for population information, and postcodes and LSOA were the kind of two key geographies used in this data set. As we're working with spatial data, we'll end up with a lot of these terms. So if you're not familiar with LSOAs or postcodes, there's lots of resources out there to give you a bit more information about those. So I just want to ask kind of Mark to start off with, why did you pick these data sets and what was the kind of process at a very broad level?
So the reason we stuck mostly with open data is that we wanted the entire process to be replicable. So anybody could, if they wanted to recreate our resource, recreate our products, they could access all of that data. I think one of the kind of broader discussion points is around kind of some data needs to be held back for sensitive reasons. But we really want to be trying to make that data openly accessible so that anyone can get hold of it. And it might be that, a local government's really interested in looking at our data on access to GP services, and then they want the more specific locations as well. And so I think it's important that where we can have open data that are replicable, that people can get hold of and see our process, and that we're not trying to hide anything behind any smoke and mirrors, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And Kostas, in terms of selecting those specific data sets, how did you come up with that list in particular?
I think that was based on the theoretical basis of this index. So our idea was to create an accessibility to health assets and hazards index. So you start with this point, and then from there you're looking what data are available. Then you're looking for the quality of this data, and having decided which geography is going to be the reference geography for your index, then you can make the decision if these data are appropriate or not. So that was mainly.
Yeah, the reference geography being LSOAs.
LSOA, yeah, the lower super output area.
So it's kind of what level do you want the index to be, and then what data is suitable to work with an index at that level.
Exactly. And you want your geography to be representative, and you have to make sure that your geography is going to reflect the needs of the local authorities, or who's going to use this index. So that's really important.
Great, wonderful. Thank you. Okay. So we said a little bit in the previous talk about network distances being kind of fundamental underpinning for this index, and there were some variables that don't lend themselves to network distances, so air pollution particularly, and so we ended up combining those two different types of data. We're going to say a little bit more about Rutina later on, I think. But were there any particular issues or problems with combining these two different types of data, which at first glance might be quite different in terms of how they're structured?
So that's a question. Yes. Yeah, there was quite a few challenges, and that's why you need a multi-dimensional index, is because it gives you the flexibility to play around with different methods and try to find the appropriate one, so to be able to create an index at the end. So the challenges were mainly the challenges that everybody needs to, is going to face everybody that needs to create an index, and that's the distribution of its variable. So the distribution is not the same for every single variable. So you have, for example, air pollution is totally different distributed over, England than, for example, accessibility to GP practices. So all these different distributions, to make sense, we need to put them, to standardize them and put them in a same, let's say, range, so to be able to combine them. So that's the biggest challenge that a researcher faces for creating an index.
Wonderful, great. And we're going to pick up on a few of those challenges later on, and how we actually, how you actually combine those together. Wonderful. So, this is, excuse me. So this is a kind of just a general overview of the index. Overall, we've got better access to healthy choices in the periphery of the urban core, and worse access in urban cores and the rural areas. And we touched previously on a bit of the kind of urban-rural divide, and we could do a whole another session on urban-rural sides of things. So this is just a kind of a big picture for the data set itself. In terms of we've banded this term about a bit already, MDI, multi-dimensional index, or multi-dimensional indices. So overall, it's a kind of framework of methods. And Kostas, could you give us a kind of overview of how you use this for the AHAH index? And then we can pick up certain bits later on.
Yes, of course. So the multi-dimensional index generally has been used from many governments to create indices all over the world. It's very standard framework to work with and produce an index that can be comparable and can keep track of a phenomenon in your society that you want to have a picture and over time, if you like, but also if you want to compare it with other countries and so on. So the IMD index, the multidimensional index framework is actually helps you to combine many different indicators and create one single measure that is really simple to be understood, and and the most important, to highlight the phenomenon in its area. That can be a country, that can be a much more targeted region, and so on.
Okay, great. So it's this kind of comparable nature that's key, and it's almost as though it's a kind of very repeatable framework. So it's a kind of nice, clear method that can be applied in many different countries. If a different country wanted to create its own AHA index. So.
Yes, of course, yes. That's the idea behind all the indices. That they creating a simple measure that can be repeated from other countries or regions, or depending on who is going to be the organization that is going to use it, and produce a really comparable measurement.
Mm-hmm. Great, wonderful. So we said a bit about why this method, because of the comparability. Were there any other methods you considered and decided not to use, or anything more you want to say about why you chose MDI?
Yeah, you can have clustering methods, and also you can have more recent methods like random forest methodology that create a kind of index from that, if you like. But the idea here is that all these methods, they have some, everything is driven by the data. And for example, for clustering, the data sets are quite, they need to be standardized properly. Otherwise, your clustering is going to fail. So as we mentioned earlier, our indicators are quite, the distributions were quite different. So the clustering is very challenging to be achieved in this case. So the multi-dimensional indices, they have the advantage that they can actually tackle these issues by removing information, but aiming for one specific target, which is to create a single measurement, a single index that can be interpreted very clear and easily. So I think that's the main idea of selection of multi-dimensional index for AHA.
Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, so moving on to the next section. So we've touched on a little bit that the multi-dimensional indices approach framework is the same one as used by the Index of Multiple Deprivation, which is in the UK is quite a widely known measure of deprivation, and it's used by a local and central government for a whole host of things. Can we say a little bit about, is it a good thing that you're using a similar method to that, or is it a bad thing, or is there a kind of a bit of both in there?
I think it's, I mean, the reason we follow the IMD approach is given that the IMD is such a well-used and well-established data product, that it made sense to try and follow what they'd done before rather than trying to reinvent the wheel here. Now, that's not to say the IMD's approach is the best or the most appropriate way for building indices, but we decided that given that we was going to be working with local government, it made sense to try and justify it by following their approach. Now, there's aspects of that approach which have certain problems. So like the IMD derives its weightings for certain domains through more of a data-driven approach, which we discussed in the first videos might be necessarily not always great. But I don't think there is necessarily any right way in, developing indices. It's more an art than a science. There's lots of different ways you can approach it. A lot of them are appropriate, and it's about justifying your decisions. And like we discussed in the first video, we've made this all openly available. So it's up to people if they want to reinvent our index and say, actually, we think this is a much better way of doing it. We encourage that. We'd love to hear from people who think they've got a better idea and how to improve it, because I think that's the sort of thing we can learn from, and the sort of thing that open principles in science really do help with.
Great. Okay. No, Thank you. No, it's great to get a bit of the background. And you know, we've got to remember there are no absolutes. It's, you know, there's lots of different ways of doing things, and it's why you picked a certain method and how you justify it. That's often the key bit. So yeah, so we have a kind of overall view of the process. And one thing we've alluded to a couple of times, but not really said much about, is the kind of first step. So it's this theoretical basis. And this is, as I understand it, is key to building any type of index is, well, what are we measuring and how do we want to measure it? So could you say a little bit about the theoretical basis? And so what those kind of first steps were and how they informed the later steps?
So I think the important step is having a very clear defined index that you want to measure, and you've got perfect or good inputs to measure that. Because one of the issues with building any index is you'll get an answer either way, and you'll get a metric that might be misleading or might not have any interpretable value to the rest of the world. So I think spending a lot of time in this stage is the most important part of building an index. And we in the kind of AHAH team spend quite a lot of time just charting out what we should be doing, what we can measure, and what's useful. And that comes from talking to stakeholder groups as well. But, you know, at the end of the day, even something that's very narrowly defined, so if we take the IMD example, they're trying to measure deprivation, but there isn't actually a thing as deprivation. Deprivation is more a concept that you're trying to measure as a proxy through a series of indicators. It's the same for AHAH. We're not necessarily measuring anything other than we're trying to get a handle on how healthy or unhealthy environments are. And here's a range of data that might summarize these issues. Again, it's about being open and honest with people about kind of what your metric is about and what it can and can't do. I think is important, because metrics get used and they get abused a lot, which is one problem with developing these things.
Okay, great. No, that's wonderful. So in terms of, we've got a kind of nice flow chart of the process here. So Kostas, I was wondering if you could take us through this kind of process. We've got a few slides later on going into more detail, but if you take us through at a kind of top level, that would be really useful. And of course, we've got to remember our theoretical input is above the flow chart, so it's kind of above that off this graphic.
Yes, of course. And I think that there is also another level which is quite crucial, is to prepare the data before you reach the point to aggregate them at the LSI level. And that's a really big hurdle, because most of the data, they're coming in different forms, and you try to put them together. And you have to check, for example, your indicator, if you have the right direction in terms of what you're measuring, because you're creating an index and you want to have them all your indicators looking to the same direction, instead of the one canceling the other one. So yeah, so having all the cleaning and the preparation of the data, and then the first step, of course, is to aggregate data at the LSI level. So that's the level that we selected for our index to be, the base. And then you have to make a decision of the standardization method, which can be, there are many methods around how to do that. The easiest method is the ranking. So you just create ranks for each of your variables, and then you create a rank-based normal transformation, and this one gives you the ability to merge these indicators together. There are other methods like Z-scores, which is the most common one. But as I said before, the Z-scores, for example, can be very sensitive on the distributions of your data. And so that's why we selected ranking, because our data sets were quite, the distribution were quite different between our domains. So yeah, so the first steps, as I said, is to rank its indicator. Then we use a rank-based normal transformation. That's because when you want to merge, you cannot merge a ranking of variables. So what you want to do is to create a measure of a normalized distribution that represents your ranking. And then if you require to apply some weighting for these indicators, then you can do that. Most of the times you can see people using factor analysis to determine these weights, which is very statistical way to just look for association between your indicators. But in our case, we just found that there wasn't any need for a factor analysis weights to be introduced here. So we thought that the best approach was to just use equal weighted measures. So then for having decided this step, then you build the 4 domains that we have in AHAH. And the next step again is we need to put these 4 domains together. So that becomes again a challenge, because you have, for example, in AHAH we have 2 domains that they are promoting, let's say, the health, and two domains that are actually negating health in our neighborhoods. So
these were
the 2 domains canceling, the one cancels each other.
Yeah.
So to avoid that.
Just to recap, these were the 2 kind of positive ones. It was hospital facilities and.
Yes, it's the health domain and the green and blue space.
Oh, yeah.
So the closer, for example, are you to a green space, that's a good thing. So the closer to be to the GP practice, that's a good thing. But the closer to you are in retail service outlet, then that's not very good.
Mm-hmm.
And the same happens if you have high numbers of air pollution. Okay, so having 2 and 2 domains, and what's going to happen if you just equally weight them, then the 2 domains, they're going to cancel each other. And for this reason, we use exponential transformation. This transformation helps us to avoid this cancellation. And it's not something new. That's something that we borrow from IMD, and it's well explained in IMD as well, why there is a need for that. And we found that yes, it is really important to apply the exponential transformation and avoid this type of cancellation. And it works very well. And then again, we have to make a decision if we want to weight our domains. In our case, again, we have 2 domains that are good for health and 2 that are negate health. So we thought that again we have to keep it equal weighted for each of the domains, and then this we merge together and we create the high index. So that's pretty much the methodology we follow.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kostas. No, it's great to go through those 6 stages, and we're going to pick out a few more details about a couple of them now. So we talked about the transformations. So this was in terms of when we go from the kind of aggregate data at the LSA level to do the rank-based normal transformation. Can you say a little bit more about how you picked which transformation you did?
Yeah, in the first stage, let's say, first of all, the transformation, we use transformation because we need to merge the indicators or the domains. Mm-hmm. We need to, to merge, the measures. If it's possible to avoid the transformation, then it's advisable to not do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important the transformation to be the last resort of your framework, of your methodology, because every transformation introduces errors and alters your original data or your original measures. So in our first transformation, the rank-based normal transformation, that's really important to do it because we took the decision to move from the measures to ranks. So making this decision to move to ranks, then there is no way to combine ranks between indicators. And the easiest way is to just introduce a rank-based transformation, normal transformation. And from this point, then actually each of your indicators become again a measure, and then which is standardized, and you can combine it and make it one single domain. For our domain, as I said before, the reason behind that was to avoid cancellation. So that's why I use the exponential transformation.
Wonderful, great. And then the other bit I think it would be useful to say a little bit about was the domain weighting. So once you have the 4 domains, we need to combine them into one index. And there's a few different approaches that you could take to this. Could you take us through that, please?
So the weightings, it happens at both the inputs, so our individual variables, whether that's green space, whether it's access to GPs, we treat them all equally, as well as the domain scores, which are all treated equally. The reason, as I've said before, we did that is because we didn't have any prior assumptions of what was more or less important. So we just felt like an even weighting, just treating everything the same, was the most open and fairest we could justify, essentially. Now, we've been pretty open about, we don't know if that is the best approach, but this is the approach that we think works fairest. But I think if you're developing your own index, you might want to consider, more of a theoretically ground approach that you can justify different weightings, and you can actually back up that evidence with, yes, we think this domain or these indicators are much more important, because at the end of the day, your weightings will be partly drive your results of your index. And if something's more weighted or less weighted, then it's going to affect how it contributes to that overall indicator. So it's an important decision that requires a lot of time and attention. The IMD, they use the factor analysis to kind of produce a more data-driven approach. But I think some of their data-driven approach was still checked over by a stakeholder group to say, does it make sense if we weight these domains versus the other domains? But whatever decision you make, it's hard to justify it, and it comes back to again that you're measuring this concept that doesn't necessarily exist, even if it's healthy environments or deprivation. You're just trying to get a best estimate of it, and because of that, it's then hard to then come up with the perfect solution to measuring these things. And it's an art in itself, and how you graph that art to get a good representation of the world is tricky sometimes. There's not necessarily a set of steps you can follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really useful. And with a lot of the kind of very data science heavy analysis that we see in other subjects elsewhere, sometimes it's quite easy to forget the theoretical basis and the real world element. But I think that's something that, as geographers, we know that's key and crucial to some of the work we do. And it's great to see how that's influenced your process here. So the kind of penultimate area, if we'll have some people watching who are interested in creating their own multidimensional indices, either customizing the AHAH one or creating their own one from scratch. We've covered a few key points already in terms of the theoretical justification specification for what your index is doing in the first place, and then what data goes into it. So both in terms of what data is available and what's appropriate. And then the balance of the domains, so some more important than others. Are there any other aspects that people should really bear in mind if they're trying to undertake this work themselves?
I think what is really important if you want to get involved in creating indices, composite indices, is to go and read and see other works, other indices, how they've created them. Because with the multidimensional indices, the knowledge comes from the experience. How much experience do you have on the field? And the best experience comes from looking the work from others, how they tackled specific problems, why they did use the specific method. So when we start ourselves, we have some, knowledge. We have the skills, but we had to go and look and read about, the challenges the others face. So to be aware of that and be able to, make the right judgment in terms of the selection of the method and so on. So I think that the best way to start is to just go and look other indicators, how they build them and why.
Yeah, I'd echo the comments of Costa. And also probably throw in that, talking to people, talking to stakeholders, talking to people who might be users and getting their views on what they'd like to see in there and building that kind of into your process, whether it's building that into your theoretical grounding or building it into what Costas was saying in the kind of discussion of how other people have built these things in the past. Because we've learned so much from just working and talking to others that we never think about, because you're always coming from your own particular point of view.
And that's one of the great benefits of working with an interdisciplinary team, getting different people's opinions and talking to yourselves about what you've done and kind of building on that experience. So in the future, we will have some interactive sessions with Mark and Costas. So if you do have questions, do come along to those. We're happy to help out via email if we can. But if you can actually talk to us, please do. And we're very happy to help with that. So we kind of covered the kind of final point already, really. In terms of the kind of strengths and weaknesses of the multi-dimensional indices framework, and there's lots and lots of different elements for it, and there's a lot of pros and cons to each decision you make. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that side of things?
I think one thing that I have to mention is that the strength and the weaknesses of its index depends on the methods used in this index. So for example, in our case, we have used a ranking method. That means that we have lost any information related on the range of, we cannot measure the difference between areas, but we can know, for example, if one area is worse than another, but we don't know the degree of this change. But other indices, if, for example, they use Z-scores, then they keep this information and then they can answer this question. So it's really important to, when you see an index, to see what is the, the weaknesses of this index, but also what is the advantages of this index. So that's really important to be aware of these limitations.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the AHAH index, so we could, to give an example, we could say that an area of 20 is less deprived than an area of 24, but we can't say it's half the deprivation of the area of 10.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so it's the kind of the score at the end and how we help people interpret that.
And that's the same for the IMD as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's pretty much similar methodology. What we have to understand here is that why these indices have been created the way that they have been created. The indices have created this way because what we want to do is to highlight areas in need. So in our case, it's with bad health accessibility, or in IMDs with in terms of deprivation. But the aim is to highlight these areas. Then the planners, they're gonna go to these areas and do extensive analysis on these areas and do, collect more information and try to understand better what's happening in this area, why we have this area highlighted, and so on. So it's an indicator. Again, it's the name index, doesn't give you all the answers.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you for that. Mark, any kind of parting words of wisdom?
I think Kostas has summed up brilliantly. I think the one thing we haven't discussed about is thinking about how you release your index, and actually whether you're going to go for a fully open approach or a closed approach, but also really building in tools, thinking about how your users might use these products. So we have the CDRC Maps platform, which is really good for having people to interact with our resource, but supporting that with appropriate metadata, resources, guides. It's a lot of work, and it shouldn't just be we've released this index. It should be we've released this index and provided a lot of support to help and maximize the reach of how people might use and engage with it.
Mm-hmm. Great. No, that's a really, really, really good point, and it's something that we should all remember, the work we're doing. How do people use it, and how can you support that? And we hope this set of videos has been useful for people using the index and thinking about creating or editing their own. Please do let us know how you get on. Please do provide some feedback in the comments or send us an email. There's links below the video. There's also a workbook associated with this session where we take you through the process in R of creating a multidimensional index. We use AHAH as an example. We've simplified a significant chunk of the process, but it will give you a good overview. And there's various points where we explain the decisions that have been made for AHAH. And if you're applying that to your own data, do remember, the key points that we've talked. I don't think we can emphasize that enough for it. Great. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and thank you, Mark and Kostas, for your input. It's great to have a discussion and hear about your experiences. And I look forward to the next time we all meet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.